Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Tala, and I'm an SSI Science Communication intern this summer. This is the fourth episode of our Live with the SSI Intern series, where we interview members of our SSI cohort. This is co-hosted by myself and by Amy, the other SciComm intern. To provide a bit of background, SSI stands for Summer Systematics Institute, and this REU, or Summer Experience for Undergrads, is funded by the National Science Foundation. With the exception of myself and Amy, all of our peers are working with a curator or a postdoc here at the California Academy of Sciences. So we have a preset list of questions for our interns, but please feel free to leave comments or questions in the chat below, and we'll get to them as the discussion unfolds. Without further ado, we are so excited to introduce you all to our guest today, Ethan Nye. Ethan, would you like to share your hometown, your pronouns, home institution, and anything else you would like the audience to know?
Yeah, hello. My name is Ethan. I use he, him pronouns. I am a rising senior at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. I'm a biology major. I also minor in jazz saxophone, so a little fun fact. My hometown is Medfield, Massachusetts, which is a relatively small town outside of Boston. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I love that you minor in jazz. I didn't know that. That's so cool. We will come back to that. But our first question for today is, how would you explain your summer research project to a fifth grader?
Yeah, so my research is mainly focused on a group of soft corals called sea pens. And they're called sea pens because they resemble old-fashioned like feather quill pens that were really common around the time where people started really sort of like scientifically studying them, which is around like the 1700s. So just imagine sort of like this feathery looking thing. And then like fun fact about like the history of the sort of discovery of sea pens is that the ancient Romans observed them and they were aware of them. And the ancient Roman name for the sea pen was, well, it was in Latin, but the English translation translates to sea feather. So yeah, humans have been like interacting with them for a long time, but most people tend to get really confused when they see them, especially oftentimes when they get washed up on beaches. People look at them and they don't really know what they're looking at because it doesn't really look like an animal, but it doesn't really look like a plant either. So they're these sort of like really odd, bizarre, alien-looking creatures. People tend to confuse them for other like marine invertebrates like sea cucumbers, or sometimes people think they're like organs from like other animals. Like sometimes they look like tongues or weird things. So so that brings me sort of to my next point of what is a sea pen. So sea pens, like most other corals, are colonial organisms, meaning that one coral is actually made up of many individual polyps. So they can range from a few polyps to several like thousand polyps, depending on the size of the colony. And sea pens specifically are like super diverse. Like they exist basically in all of the world's oceans. They can exist from depths ranging from like intertidal zones like tide pools all the way to like thousands of meters into the ocean. So they're a very diverse and very well spread group of soft corals. And specifically, like my work this summer is going to be looking at, we're like focusing on a group of sea pens that my mentor Dr. Gary Williams, calls the rock pens. And they're called rock pens because they have this sort of uncommon ability to attach themselves to rocky surfaces. So most sea pens live by burying part of their body in the sand, and that sort of keeps them fixed in the ocean and keeps them from like floating away and whatnot. But the rock pens are sort of special because they have like an adaptation at the bottom of their body, which allows them to stick to rocky surfaces. And the adaptation is essentially like a big suction cup that allows them to like, it literally what they do is they like stick to rocks, and then I think what they do is they suck some of the water out from the inside of like the suction cup part, and that creates like a vacuum that allows them to stick to rocks. So my job this summer is to sort of study the DNA of these species and then discover how, or to figure out how they're evolutionarily related to other species of sea pens, and like the sort of ultimate goal is to visualize that as an evolutionary tree. So that's sort of my job, sort of this summer.
Wow, that's so cool. I feel like when I think of corals, I just think of like the typical corals that
Hmm.
you see in Nemo and stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
But now I'm kind of wondering if I've ever been on the beach and actually saw these sea pens, but thought they were something else, like how you mentioned. People mistake them for a lot of things.
Yeah,
That's really cool. Did you know what like sea pens looked like or what they were before getting involved in this project?
I did. I mean, I knew what they were. I don't remember like the first time I saw one, but I remember like one time watching this video about um, marine biology and seeing a sea pen for the first time, and then really thinking to myself, like, this is an animal. Like this is a thing that just like exists. I mean, it doesn't really move around a whole lot. Or actually, I mean, they can move around, but most of the time they're sort of like sedentary and they just kind of like hang out. And they're just such bizarre alien like organisms that like most people don't really realize or think about as animals, but they are. Um, yeah, but to answer your question, I did know a little bit about sea pens, but I was always curious to learn more about sort of like their anatomy and like the life history of sea pens and sort of like the ecology, because like I don't know, they're just weird. They're funny and they're weird, and I think that's what I really enjoy about them.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like a lot of scientists that I've spoken to, whatever their subject that they study the most, you just can always get them to rant about how weird and cool they are. And I think most scientists, we just like the funky stuff that just we just think is cool and funny. Uh,
Hmm.
like all the memes that we send each other in our
Yeah,
SSI Discord chat.
yeah, yeah.
But talking about first experiences or exposures to things, what did you think research was before you started this internship, or maybe before you had other previous research experiences?
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like my sort of like growing up, sort of my idea of what I thought science research was, I feel like my sort of the notion that I had of what scientific research was very narrow-minded, and I sort of thought that all science research was just like you sit in like this sterile, boring room with like a bunch of people like in lab coats, like pipetting stuff all day, or like messing around with like lab rats and stuff. Um, and I think, I mean, it like turned me off because I didn't want to be a part of that. It just like I don't know, it just wasn't interesting to me. Um, yeah, so like I guess as a kid I never wanted to do research. I was like, okay, I don't know, like I'll major in biology, but I don't think I'd want to do research like as a job because it feels boring. And I think that sort of misconception held me back for like the longest time, because I don't know, it wasn't even really until like maybe my sophomore or junior year of college when I really started to like find out, or I guess like discover sort of like the vast array of what scientific research can be, especially in biology. Even in biology, I mean, it's just this, what constitutes as research can be so incredibly, diverse. Like you have lab work, you have field work, but even like lab work and field work can look drastically different depending on like what field of work you're in. I mean, even talking about like the work that my mentor Gary does. um, he's done like tons of expeditions where he'll do like diving in the coast of California, and he's been to like the Philippines, he's been to like Australia, he's been to like everywhere basically. You name it, he's probably, been there for like an expedition collecting specimens and like studying wildlife and corals and stuff there. Um, but it doesn't even have to be diving. He does a lot of research using ROVs, which are remote operated vehicles, which are like literal like robot submarines that you send into the ocean, and then you can like send them to like the deep ocean, and then where like you can't dive, and then they can collect specimens through that. um so yeah, research is very diverse, and I didn't really realize that until, even largely until like I got here. I don't think I really understood like the sort of scope of like what a lot of people do even in the academy, like until I got here and I started talking to people. But yeah, the thing I think sorry, were you gonna say something? Okay. But just like really quick, I think like the thing that sort of the thing I think I've discovered about myself about why I enjoy doing research now is I think I realized that if you find something that you're genuinely interested in, like you won't mind the parts that might seem boring because I enjoy my research a lot now, although like on paper it might sound boring and meticulous and very repetitive, but I feel like it's sort of like the overall goal of my research that really drives sort of like my interest. I say it sounds boring on paper because like if you like look at it, it's kind of just like it's like a list of things that you do and like repeated tasks. Like it literally is like you sit around and you pipette stuff and you kind of wait for hours. But I think it's sort of like understanding the perspective of where they're coming from, what the ultimate goal is, and stuff like that that really like changed my view and sort of like made me or helped me to enjoy biology research.
Yeah, I love that. I love it's kind of funny how you started out saying like I don't like to be like I don't want to be in a lab pipetting and then like
Hmm.
that's a big part of what you do now, but it's like you said like you can handle that stuff if you know that there's a better goal. And I think me too, like when I started with research, I thought it was the same thing, like sitting in a lab in a lab coat. And I was like, that just sounds so boring. Not that it doesn't hold value, it does. But even field research, like when I figured out field research, or even now, like as you said, like part of our internship is being exposed to museum curators and collection managers. And it's like, I didn't know this was a thing, which sucks because I feel like people should know more about it. But it's also cool that we get to get like exposure to it in the way that we are.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
totally.
but I'm curious to know, like, do you feel like you are a scientist as you're doing this research, and as an added, like a just as an extra layer, like how does do you think that your jazz background influences any type of your science stuff, or is it very separate? I know that's kind of two questions, but I'm very
Oh, that's
curious.
an interesting question. I'll go back to like the second question, and if I forget it, please remind me. But I guess like going to the question of like, do I feel like a scientist? I guess like by definition, I am a scientist because like I'm working on my own research project at like this major scientific institution. So like technically yes, like I'm get like it's my job, right now. Like when I do my taxes, like I'm gonna write that's like, I'm like a scientist on paper, but like in a more like abstract sense, I don't know, I feel like it's a lot more like complex than that because I don't know. I don't it's really hard to answer for me, like, if I feel like a scientist because I still feel like I have so much I feel like I still have so far to go until, like, I can call myself a scientist. Like, because right now I'm still a student, I'm still in school, I still feel like I have so much to learn. Everything is, like, new to me. Um, I don't know, but, like, I feel like there might be, like, sort of like an experience aspect of, like, being a scientist, like, you know, I don't know. You need to like know this certain amount of things or like know how to do these things or like have this experience. Like the scientists that I'm familiar with, like my mentor Gary, like have thousands of hours of like field work and expeditions and like lab work, and then like has tons and tons of publications under his own name and stuff like that. And he can like he's incredibly accomplished. So like I don't know. I guess the bar's high, but I don't know. I guess at that point it becomes sort of a paradox because like when would I ever call myself a scientist if like the threshold is so impossibly like high? um I don't know. It's a very difficult question, I think, for me to answer. So like yes, but also no. I guess is sort of my answer to if I feel like a scientist. Um yeah, I don't know. And then sort of like the second part of your question about like does my jazz background influence my science? I don't know. That's an interesting question. I had never really thought about that. I think maybe not directly in terms of what I'm interested in science, like in terms of like, you know, jazz doesn't really overlap that much with like marine biology, like directly. But I think maybe like in terms of in terms of like mindset, maybe like jazz is sort of about expression, and it's about freedom, and it's about improvisation. It's about communicating with other people. I think those sort of aspects like can bleed into like maybe the way that I do science or the way that I might approach science in like this really like abstract way. I don't know. I think maybe like the way that I've that I like interact with some of my peers, like my musician friends and my musician peers, I think might influence the way that I interact with like my biology friends. I don't know. I don't know if that's like the right term, but like I feel like there's this sort of culture in music or art in general where like, or at least that I'm familiar with, of like really being supportive of one another and like really being it's like being supportive but also like being honest. Like me and a lot of my friends who are also like saxophone players or musicians and stuff, we spend a lot of time talking about music, and we spend a lot of time talking about like our own music, like when we play, and then we like talk about it, and then it becomes like very supportive. And I've thought about ways to like bring that sort of like supportive aspect into like my science, because I feel like in like a professional setting in like science, I feel like people get way too lost in like competition. Like people, I don't know. It's a lot. I think like especially where I come from, where in my school a lot of bio people are like pre-med people, so like they have to be competitive by like because it's just such like a cutthroat trade. Um, but I've really wanted to like reduce like the amount of like competitive like toxicity that can exist in science, and sort of replace it with like more of like an uplifting and like building on each other sort of like collaborative aspect that I've learned from interacting with my fellow musicians. I don't know if that makes sense. That felt really long-winded, but hopefully there was a message in there. Yeah.
No, that was a great answer. I know I kind of just sprung it on you, but that was great. I loved how you talked about like improv, like
Oh, there goes the
improvisation.
lights. Come on, I'm still here. There we go. We're
Like,
back.
you have a
Sorry.
safe environment with motion lights, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, I like how you mentioned improv in jazz, because I also feel like in science, a lot of scientists I've spoken to, you're like, how did you even come up with this? And they're like, you just kind of try things, you just kind of see where it goes. So I always love talking to people that have like different backgrounds, because it really does enhance, like, it really can enhance your science. And
Mhm.
the competitiveness is very real. So,
Yeah, totally.
yeah, so great answer. Thank you.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Great question.
Thanks. Yeah, well, talking about jazz kind of segues into our next question, which is how does your personal identity inform your science? So a little similar to the jazz thing, but a little bit
Mhm.
more, like a little broader.
Yeah. Well, um, yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, I think sort of like for me, my personal identity shows up most prevalently in my personality. Most specifically in my sort of like curiosity in science. And I think like I think like a weird thing that I've learned about myself is that the more I learn about science or biology, like the more interested I get in it, because and it's an interesting development I feel like for me, because I didn't really discover like my passion for biology until maybe like my junior year of college even. Um I didn't enjoy it when I took biology in high school. Because I don't know, I feel like I didn't have the great teacher, like the best teacher, and like sort of my friends and stuff around that time were like, "Oh, biology is like so I don't know, it's like so boring or whatever, like mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell." I feel like I was just very very narrow-minded at the time, and I was always just kind of like meh. Even in college, like I started college my whole freshman year. I was an engineering major, and then I switched to biology to do pre-med. And then so like when I switched majors my sophomore year, I took intro bio 1 and 2, and even like those classes were kind of like meh for me, because I don't know, it wasn't until sort of like fall of my junior year when I took like an evolutionary biology class. that really changed my perspective on things. Um, and I think taking that class was really sort of like is like a turning point, I guess, in my the way I see things, because it taught me that like basically everything in biology can be explained or is like somehow related to like evolution in some way. Because it's sort of like the driving force behind like why things exist. Like we have hands because of evolution. We have like we can talk because of evolution. We have brains because of evolution. Like you know, our cellular pathways exist the way they do because of evolution, and like I don't know, just like basically everything. So that totally like changed my perspective on things, and yeah, it was just like sort of like an eye-opening moment. Um, but yeah, going back to like the curiosity thing, I think like one thing that I've discovered as I like keep learning and I keep learning about biology and stuff is that um, two things happen when I learn about biology. First is that I learn, like I take in the information, and then I'm made aware of things. And the second thing that happens is that I am made aware of all the things that I don't know about like a certain topic, because it's sort of a thing like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know about something. And I think that sort of like creates this sort of like feedback loop of curiosity for me, because the more information I take in, the more questions I have about it, which leads me to like seek out more information. So like it creates this endless loop of like learning and like questioning and discovering. And I think that like makes me really excited, just that whole cycle that I really love. Um that I didn't really like discover until relatively recently. So yeah, it's very, very cool.
Yeah, that's great. I definitely agree with the curiosity feedback loop. And I think it's probably the best, feedback loop
Mhm.
to be stuck in
Yeah,
is just
absolutely.
constantly be curious. Because I feel like even when you were talking about your mentor, Gary, like I'm sure him and other people, other scientists that we know that are just as accomplished would probably be like, I don't know a lot of things.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it just goes to show that it doesn't matter like how far you get. There's always something new to learn, which can be both daunting but also very exciting. And I feel like
Yeah. Yeah.
us by nature, we get a little bit more excited than like it is daunting.
Yeah, I think that's sort of like what excites me most about like where I am right now and sort of like my development or like my career, because like right now, like as I'm sitting here in the Cal Academy, like everything that I'm learning is new to me. Everything is novel, and everything feels very like new and exciting. And I feel like I've already learned so much from just being in this program for like the last several weeks. Um, and that's really pushed my excitement to like see like what the future holds, like what I'll keep learning as a student, and then like what future research that I do like could like what might come up and stuff like that. So yeah, endless curiosity loop. It's a good loop to be in.
No, definitely. Like that's how, you know, maybe you'll get an opportunity you never thought of and you're like, hey, this sounds kind of interesting. And then you go and it works out, or maybe it doesn't. It's just
Mhm.
trying. It's kind of like that improv thing that you mentioned, just trying things out,
Yeah, yeah,
seeing
yeah,
how
yeah.
it goes in the moment.
Yeah, it's about like taking chances and stuff like that. And I think a lot of people say jazz is about like taking a chance and being creative and like in the moment, like doing things that you didn't realize that you could do, or like you know and I think that sort of mindset can also exist in science. Like I think we should, as scientists, strive to like find new approaches to do things, or like think outside the box when we approach certain issues, and stuff like that. Because yeah, like sort of the best ideas in science historically have like been very like different. Like think about like Darwin's evolution idea. It was super, I guess, like controversial at the time, where it challenged a lot of like pre-existing notions of like where humanity and where life came from. um, so yeah, like I think science can they can like jazz, sort of the improvisatory nature and the sort of like taking a chance nature of jazz can bleed into like the way we can approach science. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So, one final fun question, just to wrap us off before we pull some questions from the chat, if we have any, is I want to know what's your biggest science hot take?
Mm. Yeah, I kind of like, I feel like the answer that I have for this might not be like a hot take for us, who work in like biodiversity and like ecology and stuff, because I feel like just because it's what we do, but I feel like so much of public discussion of biology is like way too centered around people like us, as in humans. Like, I mean, it makes sense that we would be interested in ourselves, and we'd be most drawn to like better understanding ourselves as like a species, because I guess that's sort of like human nature as a whole, is that we're just extremely self-centered and we want to keep learning about themselves, and that's fine. But like, even so, I feel like most people don't understand how important biodiversity is and can be, even for us. Like, if we take corals, for example, like coral reefs, right? Coral reefs are extremely important for protecting coasts from erosions. They protect people that live on coasts from by weakening storms and like hurricanes and stuff like that. They can protect industry if people rely on fishing as an industry, or if they rely on fishing as a source of food. Also, like the people you can bring to a place if you have a coral reef there, like ecotourism and stuff like that. So like, I think by protecting biodiversity, like a lot of people don't realize like we can save, so many more lives and stuff like that. Um, and I think my sort of like the reason why that's a hot take to me is because most of like, not most, but like a lot of the bio people I know in my program are like pre-med people, and then there are people that aren't interested at all in ecology or biodiversity, and they only want to study like physiology or like um, stuff like that, which is fine. But I think it can also be kind of like narrow-minded. Like, I I I was having a conversation with someone about the intro ecology class that we have to take as one of our like major requirements, and they were like, "Oh, this class, like the intro ecology class, it was like really boring, and it was like it's like a useless class." And I was like, I mean, I guess maybe for like some people it can be, but it's just like so narrow-minded, like um one thing that like the professor of that class told me, and when I went to like his office hours, is that like, if you um do a lot of research in protecting biodiversity, you have the opportunity to like help way more people or like save way more lives than you could ever imagine as like a doctor or something like that, like a medic, like a physician, like the coral reef thing. You could save, or you could impact the lives of like millions of people if you find this way, or like contribute to this research that it directly affects millions of people because they live near coral reefs. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, I think it's important for people to like really understand how important biodiversity is, and ecology and evolution, because most people just don't know. Also, it's just cool, like you're saying, like people who study biodiversity love it because they think it's so cool. um like, it's cool to understand how life around us works. It's cool to know about how like nudibranchs use like cnidarian stinging cells for like defense, or like how like octopuses are like extremely intelligent, and aren't related to vertebrates. Like, their intelligence is completely evolved on their own. Or like how turtle shells come from like the ribs of the turtles that have like fused together due to like mutations. Like, I don't know, it's just cool. People don't really think about that. So that is my hot take, is that people spend too much time when discussing biology talking about us. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. I think the same way that these pre-med students think that anatomy is cool is the same way that we think that biodiversity is cool
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. Um, so that's that's interesting. That's weird that people would not understand how important evolutionary biology is. But
Mm-hmm.
it also makes sense. I mean, I try to explain what I do to my parents, and if it's not a traditional like career path with science, then engineer, doctor, then it's a little
Mhm.
hard for them to grasp. But I feel like we're getting there.
Yeah, yeah. Even if like even for people that are in biology who don't go into like med school or something, but like if you don't get a job in like biotech or something, people might look down on you. You know, there's
Yeah.
this sort of like stigma of like, you know, people just don't know how like important and valuable biodiversity is, and as a result, you know, we get flack for it. But you know, don't let them hold you back.
Yeah, we can't let them. But yeah, that is, it's a weird stigma, I think.
Yeah.
I think we're cooler than any of that, but
Yeah.
that's just me. I might be biased.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely biased, but yeah.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, that's just
but
sort of
yeah,
my opinion. Those are my 2 cents. You know, there's
yeah,
always, of course, there's a place for medicine and
100%.
medical research and stuff like that. Because of
Yeah,
course, yeah, saving human lives is of course important, and curing disease is important. But
yeah,
yeah, people might not realize how much they can overlap too.
yeah. We're not bashing doctors, we
Yeah,
promise, but
doctors are cool.
they're cool.
Yeah.
Um, but okay, well, thank you so much, Ethan. You
Mhm.
gave a lot of great insight. So let's see. We do have a comment, actually, a question in the chat. So it is from L Case, and the question is: do you have any interest in scuba fieldwork?
Is that Lily L Case? Shout out to Lily. Shout out to my the coolest botanist I know, uh, and one of the only sort of botanists I know by name. Do I have any interest in scuba fieldwork? I mean, it would be cool. I mean, I because I feel like I'm so late to the party in terms of like doing evolutionary biology research and marine bio research. Like, yeah, it would be cool. And hopefully maybe I'll do dives to do real like field work and stuff like that. But I don't know. I think I should like for me personally, there's like so much other stuff that I need to like get to know first and like catch myself up to. So yes, but not maybe within the next year. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, that's totally fair, and it probably requires some like um, certifications too. I think.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
totally. Yeah.
yeah, which would be cool. I want to do that, and I want to swim with sharks, but
Right? Yeah.
that's a faraway dream.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that wraps up all of our official questions and commented questions for Ethan. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you again, Ethan. This was a lot of fun. Before we officially end, we would like to encourage everyone to follow our social media channels on Instagram and Twitter, which are on the banner on the screen right now, and so that you can virtually join us for all of our adventures this summer. And yeah, tune in Monday at 2:35 p.m. to listen to our next series installation where I will get to interview Amy, the other SciComm intern, which will be a lot of fun. So stay tuned. And we hope you all have a great day. Thank you.